Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome. My name is Wendy Wolford. I am a faculty member in Cornell's Department of Global Development and also Vice Provost of International Affairs. And I'm really thrilled to welcome you, the panelists today on our panel, and also all of the participants. This is the fifth in our series of global salons that we've held throughout the semester on critical topics. We've had fantastic conversations, very cross-disciplinary, cross-regional perspectives on future cities, on democratic challenges and change, inequality and social justice, and migrations and mobilities. The videos for all of these are available on the Einaudi Center website, and today we're really excited for this conversation on the topic of big data, AI, and new media. The participants in this conversation are from Cornell's Global Hub partner universities around the world. The Global Hubs are partnerships with peer universities intended to deepen connections and build educational, research, and engagement opportunities and exchanges in order to help us all address some of the most challenging and some of the most important questions in front of us. So thank you all for joining and for participating, and thank you to Rachel Riedel and the Einaudi team for organizing and for hosting these salons. And I'll turn it over to Rachel, who is the John S. Knight Professor of International Studies and also Director of the Einaudi Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are so excited for all of our panelists to come together today to help us begin this conversation, and all of the audience members for listening in. And I want to also invite everyone in the audience to share your questions, your ideas, your reflections, your own research centers and projects that may be related to this topic in the Q&A function. And we will use those to further the conversation and the dialogue after we've gone through each of our panelists' introductions in order to really continue the conversation and allow for the engagement of our audience. We'll use the questions and conversation itself as a continuing springboard with all of our collaborators from across the globe to be able to take these conversations forward. I'll be very brief right now because I want to be able to move on to our panelists and just to briefly explain the charge that we've given to each of them, which is to do three things today. The first is a brief introduction of their own work to be able to share what they're working on in this cutting edge field. And secondly, to share information about other initiatives, groups, and centers that at their home universities that are related to the topic and potentially ripe for collaboration. And the third is to engage in a thought experiment by addressing the question of what is the future of this research agenda that could be best facilitated by an interdisciplinary, multilateral, global research collaboration. So how could this conversation itself of leading scholars meaningfully move us forward to take up the next generation questions in this thematic area? So we think it's an exciting charge that we've given them, and we look forward to hearing their thoughts. With that, I want to move to our first presenter, Sarah Kreps from Cornell University.
Hi, Rachel, Wendy, and panelists. It's a delight to be with you today. And so I'll keep my time brief and jump right in. So I'm the director of the Tech Policy Lab at Cornell University on the Ithaca campus. And in the lab's research, my own research, I look at the effect of emerging technology on politics, policy, and society. So we look at the legal questions, the ethical questions, the technology itself. And germane to this panel on AI, my work has really looked at these what are called language models. I'm putting in the chat here a New York Times story from just a few days ago. A natural language model called GPT-3, which was created by OpenAI. And so what we were interested in a few years ago after the 2016 election was the role of information and misinformation in affecting the political psychology of people within polity. And so the concern or the question we were interested in is if you can do this at scale through artificial intelligence and machine learning, can you train a model to generate misinformation? And is that misinformation actually credible to the person reading it And B, does it change how they think politically? And so we've done this across a number of different areas. We've done it looking at training the models to generate tweets. We've done it, and here I've worked actually with Moore Ngan and his PhD students. We presented recently at Yale Law School a paper on the use of this model to better understand these kinds of questions. So that paper is under review. So there's a lot of that kind of cross-disciplinary work. I'm working with PhD students in computer science as well. And so this, just getting to this last point about the kind of not just interdisciplinary, but international scope of this, that I think is really interesting. As you know, the social media platforms have dedicated much less attention on languages other than English. So we're starting to get a good sense of how misinformation works in English and how to detect it, but it's lagging in terms of other languages. And so I think that would be really interesting and fruitful to think about this and try to develop sort of analogous research designs in the context of other countries and other languages. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for sharing that link as well. Our next presenter is Dr. Tsuhan Chen from National University of Singapore.
Thank you. Yes, yes. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Tsuhan Chen, serving as a Deputy President over research here at the National University of Singapore. I have to first start by saying that I was actually on Cornell faculty until recently, and on the Faculty of Engineering. And really, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to reconnect with Cornell and all my good friends, Wendy and many others from Cornell side. So yeah, I really hope that this interaction will lead us to future collaborations, not just between Cornell and NUS, my university here now, but also really broad speaking between the United States and Singapore. So maybe a little bit about my research. I did start my research way back years ago when I was a PhD student at Caltech, along the line of signal processing, and then image processing, computer vision, and then machine learning. And so pattern recognition into that mix. In recent years, however, I have become more and more interested and actually almost passionate about utilizing machine learning and artificial intelligence in really addressing very emerging societal issues, not to say the least, especially this thing that Sarah, you just mentioned, the misinformation online. So with my background and all my collaborators, we have now actually a proposal in the making, and I definitely welcome all of you to join us if you're interested, using really look at it from multiple angles. So first, can we stop misinformation at the source? That, of course, is pertaining to fact checking, be that news you read or images or video talking about deepfake, right, that people share online. So that's the first angle. Second angle is to look at or relook at the recommendation system that are utilized everywhere online now. And of course, we all know that it's because of the recommendation system that are designed to pull you all together with all your friends and whatever that think alike, that has created a lot of this what we call echo chamber effect online. So what can we do to rethink how future recommendation system can be redesigned so that we can mitigate a lot of this echo chamber effect online? The third angle we want to look at is how do we use computational tools, for example, visualization, to alert the content consumers so that they know, oh, if you know, like for the last week or so, you have consumed this much data online, and much of that is from unreliable sources, would you then be willing to change your behavior or reading habits in the coming weeks? So look at it from different angles. We also have collaborators, and welcome all of you in the domain as well, from the behavioral science and psychology. I think, Sarah, you mentioned some of that as well. They're really looking forward to future opportunity to work together. We have also brought in people from the more regulatory and policy-making perspective as well. So hopefully with a lot of the computational tool that we can come up together, we'll be able to make the internet a much more sensible place. Hopefully for the next 20 years, we will not repeat the mistake that we made in the last 20 years on social media. I know I'm seeing the red flashes, I should stop. But I just want to close by saying that I also serve as the chief scientist for a national level program referred to as AI Singapore. I'm just going to put up a link for everyone and see how this works. And then I'll be more than happy to talk about that if there are some other opportunities. It's a national level effort at Singapore trying to utilize to make this, well, politically speaking, the world of Singapore, the world a better place. Singapore with a trustworthy government, as for now, by the people. Hopefully we can utilize some of that, and hopefully we can utilize that to help the rest of the world as well. So I'm going to close here. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. I think already the connections between Dr. Kreps and Dr. Chen show this really is truly potentially the most interdisciplinary space in terms of thinking from regulation to communication to engineering and everything in between. Next, we'll go to Dr. Jackson Phiri from the University of Zambia. Dr.
I think the microphone is muted.
Yes, we can't hear you. We see your slides, but we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, so I will just give my my presentation. Just keep part of the work that we are doing at our department and the possible areas of collaboration. So what I want to share are just the 3 areas where we've concentrated on, where we are working in the area of artificial intelligence. The first area is the area for security, identity management, and systems. We do some biometrics or multimodal authentication. We use neural networks, fuzzy logic, and these are the technologies. So we've done some works here. Well, but the ones that are very active now are the areas where we are collaborating with the our colleagues in agriculture and the biological sciences, where we were initially doing the early warning system, issues to do with 4 armyworms, and also locust tracking. These are some of the biggest challenges that we have around. Apart from this, we also had some money from World Bank to look at the issue to do with the weather modeling and see if also this could be addressed. So for the 4 armyworm, we've been working on this for the last 3 to 4 years. The challenge that we are working with was the issue of capturing the information and giving it to the government and the necessary entities on time. Something like an early warning system, but we use machine language where we build and plant some more or less like traps, but automated ones. We plant them in the field and then they collect data which is received and manipulated in real time. So we had to use machine vision to identify these and classify these. And then we fabricated the traps from our workshops, and then we had something that looks like this, and the components inside IoT, inside machine learning, and then we the issue to do with also the identification part. So that is part 1, information collected on the web. We did spatial mapping, and then this arrangement. The other one was issues to do with locust. This is the second one. We had funding from this where we are collaborating with. The FAO has this application but it's not very useful because it requires a lot of manual identification of these red locus. And so we had to do some machine learning to do the identification and the rest of the arrangement. And then finally, part of the work that we are doing was something to do with weather forecasting. And these are some of the models that we are working on to do the predictions going forward. So I think these are the 3 areas that I wanted to talk about. And the possible areas of collaboration possible could be health informatics, and the same areas of food security, and a few other areas. Thank you so much.
Dr. Phiri, that's just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, and so many connections across agriculture, thinking about climate, migration. It's really wonderful applied work. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to Dr. Sohini Sengupta from Jindal University.
Thank you, Rachel. It's such a pleasure to be amongst this cohort. I'm the Associate Professor of Research at the Jindal School of Banking and Finance. I have an interdisciplinary training in law and finance, and for the past several years, I've been straddling many boats, particularly legislative policy making, in the field of financial regulation and technology policy. Amongst other things, I'm very curious and have been for the past many years in both how finance and technology policies are cohabiting similar ecosystems and affecting stability at a macro level, but also how human experiences at a micro level. And particularly how lawmaking and policy making, especially in the process of incrementally designing legal systems around these areas, affects our lived realities, particularly in countries in the Indian subcontinent, which bear the heavy burden of our histories and past oppressions. And very curiously, how these particular histories wind their way through to our very different presents. So a lot of the work I'm engaged in at the moment is centered around digitally mediated financial surveillance, financial technology infrastructure built around identity systems, financial privacy, and the political economy of digital communications and media regulation in India, where I am particularly concentrating on the incentives for regulation and the limitations of law. So I borrow heavily from several other allied fields, including history, political science, linguistics, legal philosophy, and anthropology. I'm also the director of the Center for Research in Finance, Technology, and Law, where I'm joined by some fantastic faculty and students who drive the conversation forward on these interdisciplinary topics. So we work at the intersection of finance, technology, and law. And our most recent series has been a research collaboration on intermediary liability and data privacy, insofar as it relates to constitutional rights, financial infrastructure, localization, and surveillance. Lastly, I think the core of my intellectual endeavor is consumed by these questions of intergenerational identity and identity systems, whether that is digitally determined through biometric means or otherwise, the political thought and rationale for identity-based control of human life and experiences, and whether it's reflected in technology laws and policies or in the semantics of pure media or financial regulation. Lastly, in terms of the next generation questions, going back to a 1996 New Yorker cartoon that promised, in cyberspace, nobody knows you're a dog. But of course, as time has gone by, we have moved towards a very complex future of fluid and immutable identities at the same time, depending on which cyberspace and context you're occupying the world today. So I think that from this, philosophically speaking, what I expect from this community of researchers and scholars, or even otherwise as people deeply interested in public thought and processes, given our particular past and transitional present, we will have to derive, I think, from common world geographies and from understanding the limits of each discipline in silo. So I am looking forward to really learning from this cohort to understand governmental incentives to regulate and intervene in these new spaces.
So beautifully put. I couldn't agree more in terms of those next generation questions. Thank you so much. Next, we'll go to Dr. Benjamin Valdés-Aguirre from Tec de Monterrey.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to share screen now. So hi, everybody. My name is Benjamin. I'm not a researcher. I'm not part of a lab as usual. I'm a full-time researcher at my institution, Tec de Monterrey in Mexico. It's a big campus system. It has, I think, 20-something campi around the nation. And so I'm going to go right into it. What do I do? My current work is basically research with undergrads. I do not have access to PhD students, so all of the things I do are undergrad level. I develop schemes where I can actually manage to do research with students in about 3 months basis, and some of them actually produce at the end publications. They are diverse in the sense that they can be either machine learning or anything, it's everything related with computer science. And this one, for example, is cryptocurrency analysis with sentiment analysis that got published a couple of years ago. And the idea is get to push these computer science majors to actually do something interesting and that's useful for everybody, right? Apart from that, I also work in developing serious games. And the idea is using pre-existing computer games and just modifying them so you can actually make computational instruction tools, basically for simulation. This one, for example, is a serious game based on a video game that it's a simulation of NASA, and we're using it to make to teach physics curricula for kids in high school. We also develop labs, tools for other labs. For example, working with the Marshall Lab, at Berkeley University, and we work. It's a group that does mosquito population analysis, basically for controlling genetically modified mosquito populations, and we do tools for them regarding analysis, optimizations, and visualizations. And I insist all of this, we do it with, kids that are undergrad. So I'm kind of proud of that. Now, initiatives. Around the 30-something campuses, we have this scheme called Socios Formadores. It's basically a rebranding of the whole education model where every single course in every single major has to work with an external company or institution. So almost every single topic that you think about, you can actually get access to a group of students that can actually work on them. They all work on a problem-based learning approach. And that's like the entry-level idea. Second, there are hubs such as this one, but focused on different topics. The one I'm part of, it's a data science hub. It's basically huge pools of projects where projects that come from the outside get assigned to teachers and researchers within the institution. Third is the undergrad programs that I work with. Usually 3 months of a student that works as a graduation project in any of the projects that I've just shown previously. And last but not least, as part of the third experiment, I would go for simulations plus AI plus games, because I do think that simulations are one of the best ways for developing skills and competencies. And usually they're multilateral research, interdisciplinary, you can mix everything in them. You can put people from every single field with computer science, big data, and AI. And this allows you to develop very, very advanced, nice tools. And I think I'm out of time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that's wonderful. And especially just to highlight, this kind of global hub partnership really has such an important space for student exchange, research assistantships, and engaging our students in these multilateral, interdisciplinary, and global collaborations. So thank you for highlighting that important part. Next, we'll go to Dr. Yves Alexandre Montjoye from Imperial College in London.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'll try to keep it quite short. I think in terms of my own work, most of what we do is really trying to use basically AI to build attacks on privacy-preserving systems and protocols, basically trying to re-identify individuals in anonymous data sets, for example. One of our most well-known results that was recently featured in a piece by John Oliver on data brokers is basically how we can, quite easily actually re-identify individuals, US persons in any data sets, 99.98% of the time using 15 demographic attributes. So taking information like date of birth, marital status, etc., very quickly when you start combining them, basically, that will make you unique even out of 300 million people in America. Recently, we also did work showing, for example, how client-side scanning solutions, such as the one proposed by Apple, are actually vulnerable to attacks, and more specifically, adversarial detection avoidance attacks. So basically, the extent to which you can modify images to basically bypass detection by the system. In terms of initiative, I think for us, Imperial X is, of course, the big one we're working on, where the goal is really to try to break silos and bring people together to work on topics such as the one we're discussing today. And then in terms of collaborations, I think quite a lot of our work is basically showing the limits of what can be done, often technically, And that raises very important legal, governance, ethical questions where there's a real need for interdisciplinary thinking and interdisciplinary work. For instance, like how do we safely use data for research, including when doing research in low and middle income countries? What kind of governance mechanism should we think of? How do we involve people in communities in how the data is being used, even if the results are anonymous? For CSAM detection, what are the pros and cons of the solutions that are being proposed? Is the technology really ready for deployment, or are other, socio-technical solutions potentially better suited to tackle the issue? And so these are just a handful from my own work of the type of question that I think we really, ought to be addressing these days. And given the community we have, I'm sure we'll tackle some of them.
Thank you so much. Really, again, this kind of the overlap between the technical and the legal, regulatory, social questions of our time. Next, we'll move to Dr. Juan Esteban Díaz from Universidad San Francisco de Quito.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. I will just share my screen now. Okay, so I'm a professor at Universidad San Francisco de Quito. I'm also the director of the Data Science Institute, and I'm the director of the master's program in data and business management. In terms of research, I basically focus on one specific problem. It's one of the things that I'm very interested on is in the real world, if you have an optimization problem, you basically have two options to solve it. Either you take something that has been developed for something else and adapt it to your situation, or you hire an expert and develops a new algorithm that is able to solve this problem specifically for your needs.
Dr. Díaz, I'm sorry, we can't. Your slides aren't visible, so I just wanted to interrupt you. Apologies.
Okay. Let me just try again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Can you see them now?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. So that's a real world problem, and the first option is not really the best solution because it has been developed to do something else, and the second one is going to be expensive to pay an expert. So what we did in our last paper, we developed a software together with the University of Manchester with Manuel Lopez Ibáñez, and this software is actually doing something really interesting. It takes as input your problem, and it outputs not the solution to that problem, but an algorithm specifically made to solve this problem according to the decision maker preferences. So if I put this as an analogy, it's as if someone asks the computer that wants a girlfriend, let's say, but not only any girlfriend. You can tell the computer I want someone who is, I don't know, 1.70 meters height, tall, brown eyes, blonde hair, eyelashes of 0.8 centimeters, and likes quantum physics, let's say. And the computer is going to give you a detailed series of steps that you have to follow in order to get that girl. So it's quite amazing in that sense. And it's also interesting in the sense that you won't be shown the moment of eliciting your preferences, solutions that are unfeasible. Let's say if I live in Quito and I don't speak Japanese, won't show me a girl that lives in, I don't know, in Antarctica and is Japanese, okay? So that's one of the things that we do, and we do it visually, and that's very interesting because you don't have to assign weights. We do this for you, and it's automatically done, and you just do that by choosing one of these sites. So you're shown two competing algorithms, and this basically maps onto weights that are further used to improve your method. So if you choose one of these sites, you get better performance on either side. In terms of other projects, we work also very closely with the University of Manchester on developing other operators, especially for genetic algorithms. Within the institute, we work with industry partners on consultancy projects, and we are trying to promote all this area of AI and useful tools to solve real-world problems through different programs in undergrad and postgrad level. So we are launching a new masters, the one that I just mentioned, and we also continuously work with the continuous education department to launch courses open to public. So that's it, I think.
Thank you so much. Really fantastic. And I can't wait to ask you how what is feasible is determined. It's really, really interesting. Next, we'll move to Dr. Lee Humphreys from Cornell University.
Hello, and thank you again. It is really an honor to be on this panel. My name is Lee Humphreys. I am the professor and chair of the communication department at Cornell University. My research examines communication technology and everyday life and critical data studies. I'm also the director of the Qualitative and Interpretive Research Institute here at Cornell. The field of communication, for those, we think we know what it means, but one thing that I just wanted to share is that we're really interested in, as a field, how we share and make meaning across time and space. And so, of course, AI, big data, and new media are very central to that. And I am only one of many of my colleagues in the department who study technology. So the key questions that drive my work are, how do people incorporate technologies into their everyday lives? So my research has specifically focused on mobile technology, social media, location-based technology, and most recently, IoT. My research also examines historical precedents of contemporary new media practices. So I wanted to share a couple of resources. The first one is the Qualitative and Interpretive Research Institute that I direct. And we have a grant program that we can fund, as well as other programs within it. The other key institute that I just wanted to mention is led by a colleague of mine here in the Department of Communication, and it is the Cornell Institute for Digital Agriculture. And that is also a burgeoning program and institute with funding and collaboration opportunities, both at Cornell as well as across the world. So for me, the future research questions and agendas are, as a communication person, of course, I'm certainly interested in where and how people are interconnected with AI and new media, whether it be as users or implicated in data. I'm interested in sustainable technological designs. And I'm also deeply committed, and I think it'll be an important challenge for us to think methodologically about how we develop and study these technologies, as well as the ethical and, of course, policy implications of these technologies as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Humphreys. Really interesting overlap with so many of the panelists, that from agriculture to ethics and development. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to Dr. Kiyoli Jiang from Tsinghua University.
Thank you for having me. So let me share the screen. Greeting from Beijing. It's actually evening now in Beijing. So sorry, can you see my screen? No?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry, okay. So we have 3 keywords today. As for my own research, I think these 3 keywords are actually very closely related. So my research is basically from the perspective of affordance. Pay attention to the new technologies, what kind of possibilities for actions provided by the new technologies, and how people perceived the emerging information communication technologies, and how the human media interaction, happened situated in specific context. So as for big data, I conduct research, try to use big data as a new kind of materials or sources for analysis and to interpret the human behaviors. And in recent years, also pay attention to the human AI interactions and the uses and effects of new media in everyday life. So as for these issues, I also teach some related courses. Sorry. And we do have a program. It's a communication data science dual degree program. So this program is between 2 universities and 3 schools. So it's between School of Journalism and Communication at Tsinghua University and the Whitby School of Engineering and Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism at USC. So just some quick examples for my research. As for big data during the pandemic, so we used the data retrieved from Weibo, it's a microblog social media platform in China. So we use the data retrieved from the social media platform, try to find out the social media affordances such as liking, commenting, reposting, and hashtagging, how these kind of functions facilitate people to initiate, get involved, and mobilize to take the like the measures of face masking during the pandemic. And we also have some research on the human chatbot interaction, pay attention to the how to build empathy within this kind of interactions. And so my team pay attention to a lot of new media, such as social media, games, web novels, and various kind of ICTs in Chinese context, and by to conduct comparative research. So as for the research in my school and in my university, I think my scholars from the STS perspective pay attention to big data, AI, and new media. So as you can see, in our school, we have computational communication lab, and in our university, we have communication, social science, and national governance lab. And for AI, in my school and in the university level, there are multiple institutions pay attention to this kind of new technologies. And I just want to mention that actually last week, we have a new lab called a Metaverse Culture Laboratory. So just a brief like thoughts for the future collaboration. I think there will be more collaboration within and in between in terms of a discipline, institutions, regions, social cultural backgrounds, contexts. So pay attention to the big data, AI, and new media from multiple aspects, from this, including design, application, representation, identity, production, consumption, ethics issues, regulation, etc., and conduct more interdisciplinary research, more comparative research from different regions and globally. And I think we should have more collaboration for both research and for teaching, and even for more social impact. Okay, thanks for listening.
Absolutely. I think your areas for the future are really being borne out in real time through this conversation. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to Dr. Jamal-Deen Abdulai from the University of Ghana.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Jamal-Deen Abdulai. I'm currently the head of Department of Computer Science at the University of Ghana. I was trained as network communication modeling specialist, and I have done quite a lot of work in terms of developing energy-aware algorithms for mobile devices. And for the past 4 or 5 years, we have established AI and machine learning team here, and I've been closely working and leading the team. The team has been working with 3 units within the university. We are working with the School of Medicine, School of Agriculture, and then School of Molecular Biology. For School of Medicine, we've been working on looking at designing low computational models, ML models for mobile application for mobile phones, because we have this issue of cervical cancer, which are usually detected very late, particularly within the rural community where we have very poor health facilities. So we've been looking at how we could do early detection of cervical cancer within the rural communities that such applications should be able to run on mobile devices where we don't have very good laboratories to do this. With School of Agriculture, I can see we already have a potential collaborator here. We have been working with them to look at early detection of armyworm, which is causing a lot of devastation of crops in Africa, particularly the maize plants. So we've been working on that as well, looking at low computational systems to be able to do this early detection. We are also working with molecular biology in the area of bioinformatics using machine learning. So currently, this is what we are doing. I think we have also done quite a number of work on water quality monitoring, remote water quality monitoring, and then prediction. Because majority of the rural community in Africa, drink fresh water right from the river, and some of them are usually polluted by miners, and at the end of the day, they develop cancers out of this. So we've been working to come out with models, also using IoT to be able to do early detection of water pollutants within the local communities. So basically, this is what the team is looking at. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdulai. Really fascinating and important applications as well as overlap. Next, we'll move to Dr. Natawat Nupaya from Chulalongkorn University.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay. My name is Natawut. I'm from Chulalongkorn University. Currently, I'm the director of Einaudi Center at the Faculty of Engineering, Chulalongkorn University. So it's really an honor to be on this panel, and let me share my, currently our president has the vision that we want to push research into innovation because we want to impact people. And my works mostly based on the mobility analysis for the past few years. For example, we work with one of the telecommunication company to study how people move, and then for example, try to identify their needs and also occupations. And lately, during this year, we shift our focus toward the movement of patients in the hospital, because there's a lot of several large public hospitals in Thailand, and there's a lot of waiting time, and we want to improve the services using the IoT, big data, and AI and process mining to form the digital lean, and hopefully that we can identify the problem and then make sure that they can improve the services. Okay. Well, I'm gonna be short about my work. So, however, in Chulalongkorn University, since we focus on the innovation, so multidisciplinary works are very important, because AI alone cannot solve the problem. You need a lot of domain experts. So, for example, last year we have an initiative called AI for Healthcare that we merged professor from medical school and AI from computer science and computer engineering working together on 12 projects. And within 1 year, we got several good results. For example, we have chest X-ray analysis using AI, and this is being used in the COVID ward in our hospital, okay, to prioritize which patient should be in intensive care. So it helped the judgment, okay. And another one, this is for the, sorry, okay. This is for the, okay, now it should work. So it's like using AI to identify the polyps in the colonoscope, okay. Yeah, and this is some of few examples that we use AI, okay. And next, what we plan to do is to move on and then try to focus more in some certain area. For example, AI for mental health. I think with COVID, there are lots of problems with the mental health, for example, depression. So we plan to create a diagnostic using AI to diagnose the people with problem with the depression, for example, by detect from the voice when they're calling in for for the call center, for example. Okay, and another one that we plan to do is about the using combined AI, digital twin, and virtual reality to create the immersive experience. For example, for the training platform, for example, for the medical team training and everything. Okay, I think that's my time's up. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really fascinating. And, you know, this intersection between mobile apps and healthcare and the kind of legal regulatory space in terms of what services people have access to. I think there's so much overlap and interesting possibility here, and with some of our projects at Cornell as well. Next, we'll move to Dr. Subramanian Ramuthri at University of Edinburgh.
Hello, greetings from Edinburgh, and it's my pleasure to be a part of this panel. I'm a roboticist by training, so a lot of my academic work has been at the intersection between robotics, machine learning, and the application of AI in a variety of different domains. I'm part of the School of Informatics, which brings together not only computer science and cognitive science, but also applications to a number of different areas, ranging from healthcare to social sciences and so on. And that is the perspective from which I'm speaking to you. So in terms of my own work, a lot of it has focused on trying to apply robotics and autonomous systems in human-centered environments. So this has ranged from applications such as autonomous vehicles, which I have taken all the way from my lab to a startup company, but also applications in the domain of healthcare, such as building assistants for surgical domains and so on. All of this experience got me thinking a little bit more about the difficulties of deployment. And from that perspective, I currently lead a fairly large project in the area of trustworthy autonomous systems, which is part of a UK-wide program in that area, looking at issues that arise when we take AI into the real world and when we have to face the difficulties of regulation and governance, social acceptance, ethical concerns. And so we're looking at this from a fairly multidisciplinary perspective, and I'd be keen to speak to people about that. One particular other project that's worth mentioning is called the Advanced Care Research Center, which is a fairly large initiative that's funded by Legal & General, who are interested in looking at, with an aging population, which is a characteristic of much of the Western world, how should we think about the deployment of technologies in order to help the social care system, but most importantly, to help the aging population itself. So in all of these applications that I'm interested in, we are increasingly finding that there's a lot of international, cultural, and social diversity when you look at the deployment from one place to the other. So I'm particularly interested in speaking to people from different countries and different systems to understand what the perspectives are, when looked at from your side, and what unique challenges arise when we think about AI-driven autonomous systems that are being deployed alongside people, to help people, and in very rare occasions to take over bits of tasks that people don't really want to do. And of course, that raises much bigger questions about what is the acceptability of these technologies with respect to power structures and economic systems and so on and so forth. So we are fairly broadly interested in that specific intersection between AI, big data, and technology such as that, and what it means to the human users. Thank you.
Wonderful, right? That question of what it means to the human user, so fascinating. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move to Dr. Qiaolei Jiang at Shanghai Jiao Tong University.
And nice to meet everyone. It's my honor to share our research on generative AI. Can you see me? Under my slide, okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, generative AI is quite different with traditional discriminative model. Discriminative descriptive model mainly for pattern recognition from given data, but the generative AI can create new data, maybe also towards metaverse. So it can be widely used to content creation, digital twin, and automatic programming, and AI-guided intuition for science. And to tackle the challenge and to promote research, we established 3 flagship projects in Shanghai Jiao-Tong University. In digital human project, we have got some amazing results on 3D face and body reconstruction and interaction and fake face detector with trustworthy computing. And in the embodied robotics, our anti-graphs algorithm has been shared in GitHub, and our 6-legged robotics performed in Winter Olympics 2022, just in Beijing a month ago. And in the generative AI intuitive science, we proposed neural fluid to learn the fluid dynamics only from imaging. Maybe it's a quite different research paradigm for physics. And currently I am the director of Shanghai Jiao-Tong University AI Institute. So the AI Institute, together with 11 research centers, build interdisciplinary research neural networks in Jiao-Tong University. Hopefully, we can have a collaboration with you. So in conclusion, we believe what AI can understand, AI can create. Thanks.
I think those slides really demonstrate the breadth of and scope, and some of the images really are just mind-boggling in terms of what is possible. Thank you so much for sharing. And next we'll go to Dr. Moore Ngan from Cornell University.
I can't share my screen yet. There we go. Sharing it now. Yeah, I'm honored to wrap up this excellent global set of presentations. I am an information science faculty at the Cornell Tech campus of Cornell University, where I'm also the Associate Dean for technical programs. My work broadly involves human access to information, and specifically over the last few years, I've been doing research on trust and trustworthiness in our information ecosystem, sometimes calling this research technology, media, and democracy. Here are just some of the projects we've been working on recently in my lab, including some work on YouTube, some work on encrypted channels that was mentioned today earlier, some about local news. But today, Salon about AI and new media, I'm interested in trust and AI. So not just in AI, in the AI system, but trust, how trust interacts with AI tools. Sarah, who went first, talked about AI-generated media that has the potential to undermine our trust in online content. But I also want us to think about trust in interpersonal communication, because we're moving from a world where we had computer-mediated communication, where I send a message or communicate via Zoom, and you receive the message as I transmitted pretty much, to a world that could be a text message or a Zoom or an email, to a world increasingly, as we've seen in other presentations, where we have an agent in the middle that can participate in communication act, suggest edits, enhancement, modify, or even generate the entire communication on our behalf. So we call this AI mediated communication instead of computer mediated communication that is generated by algorithms to achieve a specific outcome. So with AIMC, we have AI that not only can undermine our trust in content, it can also undermine the trust we have in each other. So some of my current research looks at how to understand that kind of impact that can result from these technologies. Just to mention a couple of initiatives that are maybe related. One, these are going on at the Cornell Tech campus, here seen right next to Manhattan, where it resides. One, I wanted to mention our public interest tech initiative, think about tech and AI and developing it with an idea of how it should create public interest, social impact, and social good. I think we heard about similar projects mentioned before today. This is led by Deborah Estrin here. And there are related initiatives in Ithaca and in other places in the US. And second, I wanted to mention our runway startup postdocs at Cornell Tech, where your PhD grads can come and help take their innovations into a startup company and make a product, launch a startup based on their tech. And just to finally leave it with two questions that I think are interested in the space of AI, big data, and media to explore. One is to understand AI fairness, not just in terms of output of AI, but in terms of acceptance, access, and use of AI tools across, for example, national, social, or racial divides. And second, going back to AI mediated communication and understanding how to develop AI that enhance our technology, the communication and relationships without undermining trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Moore. Just leaving us with a few big questions as the final presenter. Thank you so much. So really, there are so many fascinating and important overlaps here. What I want to do to close in our final minutes is just to raise a few additional questions that have been submitted by our panelists, by our audience in advance. And we encourage anyone in the audience to put your Q&A in the chat right now so that we can use it as a springboard to continue these conversations, to pull you in. If there are other researchers who are listening, to put in the links to your own labs and centers that might be working on related questions and projects. So please do use the Q&A so that we can follow up with all of our audience as well as with the panelists. So I want to raise a few questions just to leave you all with in terms of further points of connection and to push the agenda one step further. One of our prior panelists on the Salon about inequalities and social justice, Dr. Suraj Hongladorm from Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, asked, how can AI contribute to a more just and equitable society? Of course, that's been an undercurrent with so many of the presentations that you've all given. So really to raise that question up. Another question from University of Edinburgh is about temporality. So data in some ways, big or small, derives from the past. And the question is, what can data science and AI do for an open future? And I think some of you have addressed that in terms of thinking about generative content creation and the like. So really thinking about the role of temporality. Another question from OP Jindal Law School faculty is about the interface between AI and liability. And here in specific, thinking about the realm of law and legal liability or criminal liability, but also as some of you have raised in terms of ethical or moral responsibility and in the normative space. Another question is really about how the feasibility of particular types of projects and what are possibilities and considerations, example, for developing a bot legal code, how feasible is the development of a system like Project Cybersyn with the advent of AI and big data? Is it possible to create unbiased predictive policing software? So a lot of questions about what are the realms of possibility, and can we and should we, be involved in those realms as well? Another final question is to tie back to our colleague from Tech de Monterrey. How do we think about these cutting edge ideas permeating undergraduate education, and how do we engage them? As you've mentioned, we have opportunities for graduate students and undergrads to get involved in many of your labs. And so even thinking further about that. So I welcome each of our panelists to respond, just to raise your hands. We won't be able to get to everyone, but just a few of you, if you have responses to any of these big picture questions. Perfect. We'll go first, yes, to Dr. Subramanian.
Hi, that's a lot of interesting questions. So I'll just pick on one or two of them. I'm intrigued by the question about liability. It's something we've been speaking about with our colleagues here in the law school. And it's particularly interesting because I've spent a little bit of time in the autonomous vehicle space. What we find is the role that insurance liability and just the system as a whole plays in determining what's possible and what's deployable. It's particularly interesting, and I don't think there are any final answers. But you see some examples of what's playing out right now in the world, such as, there's one big manufacturer that says, I'll take liability for faults so that, the user of the product doesn't have to. And then there's another big manufacturer that says, no, it's really the user's fault. And that kind of lends itself to different ways in which people think about the technology, different ways in which people come to trust that technology. I just wanted to flag up that it's an extremely important question, which in my experience seems to be under-researched. There's not that much that's being said from the kind of, ranging from the economics and mechanism design perspective, but also to the social perspective on that question. And if I may just add one more comment on the education point, as somebody who's been in a computer science department for much of my academic life, I find that a lot of our students don't really have nearly enough exposure to these kinds of issues from the other schools and faculties. And if anything, it's becoming all the more important that we find ways in which early on in their career, we expose them to these kinds of ideas so that as they develop and grow, they have that perspective. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's so important in terms of the ways in which you have all demonstrated by your comments today the necessity for really thinking in an interdisciplinary manner. And so how do our university structures facilitate that for our citizens of the next generation? One other question that I want to raise, and feel free, panelists, to raise your hand if you have insights or want to take up even just one of these questions, but from Wendy Wolford, is a question about thinking about AI and big data to some extent use mathematics or other technologies that are potentially universal, but there are clear differences. And this relates to the last question in some ways, heterogeneity across manufacturers, but there are differences in development, use, implementation, and meaning across borders, spaces, geographies, experiences. And so what do you all see as the potential of cross-border or cross-cultural interactions for the potential of AI and big data and new media? Yes, Benjamin, please.
Hi, I think this is actually a very sensitive area to be careful with, because as we've seen, like most advanced machine learning techniques and AI, they're actually good at learning from the data. So if the data in one country is kind of biased, eventually when you bring it across borders, it'll actually carry certain discriminatory aspects to another country. So that's something we should be super careful about. And we've seen examples of negatively biased AIs in production a couple of times already, and we should be super careful with it, right? Because we can actually be exporting discriminations instead of the positive aspects, right, from one culture to another, using AI as a tool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, so important. One of our colleagues at Cornell also has a measure of xenophobia on Twitter, and looking at social media and the ways in which we can track using content, but how do we think about that in the legal space, in her case, from the law school. Wonderful. Any last closing comments for us? I want to thank all of our panelists for these incredibly thought-provoking presentations and for just opening up the space of possible collaborations. We look forward to following up with you and continuing this topic area, which is, of course, really at the cutting edge of our time in terms of technology, ethics, the possibility of the human. And we really thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you. Take care.